If you've ever wondered why communication feels hard for your child and confusing for you, this podcast series is for you. In this opening conversation, I'm laying the groundwork for the entire series titled When Communication is Hard. We'll talk about the difference between speech and language, why kids don't fit neatly into boxes, and the main reason communication can break down. This podcast is to help those who want to know more and want to do what is effective, not just more. My goals are simple: to help you feel oriented, not blamed, to get a bigger picture so you feel less alone, and of course, to feel confident with strategies so you know how to help your kiddo at home. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back to the language of play. As we begin, I want to thank these particular countries that showed up on this hour's top podcasts for parenting in these countries. So here we go. Here's the list this time: Cambodia, Kuwait, Armenia, Cyprus, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Slovenia, Greece, Luxembourg, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Iceland, Ireland, Mexico, United Arab Emirates, and Czech Republic. So you are the countries that at this moment, the language of play is in your top podcasts charts in the category of parenting. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Next, I want to direct your attention to the show notes because there are cool things in the show notes for you. The first is a link for money off the Family Talks Retreat created by Jackie Bailey and Todd Kudebeck. This retreat is in Costa Rica, and I couldn't recommend it more. Check it out to see if it would be a fit for your family. Another thing you'll find in the show notes is a free homeschool bundle. It's coming up in a couple of weeks, but you are able to sign up for it now, and by participating in this bundle, you will receive many, many different freebies, including one that I am putting on and have offered. That would be March 4th. The title is, Does My Homeschool Child Qualify for Speech Therapy? And we will talk about the issues and details for homeschooling families. The title is Buy to Burnout, Bundle for Homeschool Mom. Another thing you'll find in the show notes is the past authors on this show have chosen to highlight their books for this month of February. The authors that are doing this are listed in the show notes along with their books, and so you can find their episodes and listen to them. The reason we're doing this in February is because many schools in the United States honor Read Across America Month as February. Sparked by Dr. Seuss's birthday, it's continued for many, many years. And then, of course, from me, you will find things in the show notes, including 5 ways to get your kids to listen better and a freebie called Play Is, which is a downloadable that you can print and put places in your house to remind you, what is the brain space of my kids? What is play really, and how can I enter that zone so that I can understand my child better? Of course, there's also links to subscribe. So go to the show notes, find all the treasures there. And now let's get on to the main part of today's episode. Just today, I heard yet another story from a parent who wants to know why their child is struggling to learn language and speak. It came with angst and anger for what she had been told. She had been blamed for her child's speech delays. As we begin, I want you to know that delays exist for many reasons, and we are going to tease those reasons apart in the subsequent episodes in this series. Of course, sometimes delays are from neglect. We know this is possible. But the fact that you are here seeking means you are a good parent. You are doing the best with what you know. And this podcast is here to help those who want to know more. And they want to do what is effective, not only more. So welcome to this series titled, When Communication is Hard. My goal is simple, to help you feel oriented and not blamed, to feel confident with strategies, and to get a bigger picture so you feel less alone. All right, now, parents often talk to me about the confusion they have with speech and language. It is ambiguous. Those of us that have been trained in this field see it as a science, and it's not ambiguous. But for normal folks that haven't studied speech pathology, of course it feels ambiguous, the same way that anything that you haven't studied feels. The problem, though, of course, is that this is our children, and we want what is best for our children. So not only in our confusion of ambiguity, we are worried and we're scared for them. We want our children to grow up happy and healthy, and we want to do what's best for them. I know that about you. You're like that. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. What I also know about you is that you are tired of guessing. You've searched a lot of places. You've looked for a lot of things. You've tried a lot of things. And you are unsure what applies to your child. And I want to say that is a hard space to be in. But I'm glad you're here, because that is what we're going to tease apart in this next 9-part series. We're going to talk about the different categories of speech and language delay. So you will be able to figure out what applies to your child. And I will give strategies in each category, because we treat different reasons for the communication delay differently. And we do that because we want effective strategies, not just more strategies, but we want the effective ones. And communication delays don't fall neatly into one category. They don't fall neatly into one label at all. Even though when you go to the school or to the doctor, you will have a label, a category that your child falls into. That's not the reality of how we learn. And so those categories we're going to pull apart in this series. We have to look at each child for the child that they are. And that way we can figure out what this child particularly needs. And you, moms and dads, your input is super, super important for us to be able to accurately figure out what's going on. Many times parents will come into my office or will sit in meetings, and parents will remain quiet. And I'm asking questions, but they don't always realize how incredibly valuable their information is. You know your child best. You know what they respond to. You know what's going to shut them down. You know what's going to get them excited. These are things that if you tell us, we can use those things in our therapy. When you tell me these things, I can guide you how to do speech therapy techniques in the middle of your home life so that it doesn't give you an added thing to do, but rather an effective thing to do. It helps maintain that relationship is the cornerstone of the learning and of your experience, because we all know that our children learn best in the context of relationship. And as you listen, notice what sounds familiar. Notice what brings relief. That's where I want you to anchor, because that's often where your child's needs live. I'm giving you permission to trust your instincts, because a parent's instincts are very strong and should be trusted. So if you know another parent who's also worried about their child's speech or communication, this series is one you'll want to share with them. Now, how this is organized is that we're not starting with labels. We're starting with how communication is hard. Many children overlap in the categories. But we're going to talk about the type of challenge, because the type of challenge guides support better than the name does alone. We will discuss speech, which is how your words come out of your mouth, and language, which we'll define as how meaning is understood and used. No matter what the issue is with our kiddos, there are some foundational practices that are super important. And we're going to mention these foundational practices in every episode in this series because they are foundational practices. So to give you a framework, and I will dig into it more in the next episode, but to give an idea, we need to remember that many of our students, many of our children come to communication challenges feeling pressure to perform, pressure to find the word, pressure to pronounce correctly, whatever it is. Many of our students feel shame or embarrassment because they have failed themselves or their parents, whatever they've understood, not that you've put it on them, but how they have felt in the situation that they have been not understood and not been able to get what is in their mind out of their bodies in a way that others understand. And this, for many kids, does produce embarrassment and shame. They've experienced many repeated failures. And in this context, our kiddos often stop trusting that communication is a safe thing to do. So they withdraw. When that kind of thing has happened, and parents of children with apraxia or serious speech sound disorders, they particularly have seen this in their kiddos. So the first foundational piece that we always need to go to is to rebuild the trust. Your child needs to be able to look to you when things for them are hard and know that they are okay still. They need to stay connected with you even when they feel challenged. And the flip side of that, the hard side of that, is that we are trying to help them and we're trying to move them along and we're trying to do it in the way that makes sense to us. But it doesn't always make sense to the kids. Instead, they interpret through their young minds and they come up with a conclusion that we don't want them to live with. We need to keep trying to be open, even when it's uncomfortable, because we're trying to build them courage. We're trying to build in them to be brave, even when doing the hard for them type of thing to do. So in light of that, the principles that we're going to keep in mind with every one of these episodes is going to be to lower the pressure for our kiddos that are struggling to communicate, to build in success. Before we worry about their accuracy, we're going to try to build success for them. We want to support them as a whole human being, a whole child, not just support when they do it right, which is so common in our cultures. We often say, "You did it right, good job," but rather to celebrate who they are. "You're brave, I'm proud of you." It is a very different feel. So supporting the whole child. And then having them repeat you is important, yes, but with meaning and when it matters. And that's something we'll tease apart, that not always does a repetition matter. And by repetition, I mean that your child repeats your example so that we can lead them on to do it the way we want them to do it, whatever it is. Maybe it's speech sounds, maybe it's sentence building, maybe it's vocabulary growth, whatever it is. Repetitions are important, but we want to make sure that repetitions with meaning is what we focus on. And the fifth, and maybe most important part of this, is that you matter. Parents matter. You parents matter more than the perfection of how you do it. You matter more because the relationship is the foundation on which your child builds communication. Every time. I'm going to say that again. Your relationship is the foundation on which your child builds communication every time. With this in mind, I built a coaching program so that parents know how they can help. The fourth component of the coaching program is everything we just talked about. It is that relationship trust, that key foundational piece that is the glue that makes everything work together. Now, the other parts of the coaching program is usually what parents come to me about. They think, if I just had the specific skills, I would know how to implement. Or if I knew how to practice it in daily life, then I could be sure to get the practices done. Or if I could just understand my child so that I would be able to choose for myself what to do, then it would be better. So these are the other three areas of that coaching program. I definitely give you the skills that you need to implement. An example of that would be, how do you teach a child to say the R sound? Or how do you develop vocabulary with a child that has very few or no words? Or how do you use pictures to support language development? Key skills like that. And of course, you need to know how to do it in the everyday life so that it stays joyful. And that is something that we definitely talk about, because it doesn't matter if you introduce a skill once. Skills need to be practiced, no matter what they are. For you, for me, and for our kiddos. And of course, understanding your child's brain developmentally. That's significant too. An example of this would be understanding what you can expect of them. How to teach in ways their brain learns so that they respond better to instruction. Understanding how long you can expect them to attend to something that's hard. And when we practice, how do we make it joyful from their perspective? In this area, parents often say, well, they've done it before, so they know it. Or, they should know better, we've practiced it before. But this is rarely accurate. Because what your child has done regularly and often is more reflective of what they actually know than what they have done occasionally or sometimes. And even in this arena, you will see later on that just because they know it once doesn't mean they always know it. It kind of depends on what hard communication thing they're dealing with. So we'll tease that out. Here's what we're headed into in the upcoming episodes. Part 2 of this series, called When Communication is Hard, will be titled When Speech is Hard to Produce. And this is going to be about motor speech disorders. Now, when we talk about motor, we're talking about muscles and the coordination of our muscles with our breathing, with our mouth, our tongues, our lips, all of that, and our voice to be able to move in coordination. One diagnosis you may have heard of is childhood apraxia of speech. This is a motor speech disorder. The child's brain struggles to coordinate the movement of the lips, jaw, and tongue with the breathing and the voice in order to produce clear speech. There is no lack of intellectual ability. There is no lack of understanding. This child has a motor speech disorder. Their ability to move the muscles are affected that way. There's another thing you may or may not have heard of, and that would be called dysarthria. And this also is a motor speech disorder, but it's almost like the opposite direction. It can be the result of a brain injury or a nerve injury, and it'll weaken or paralyze the muscles that are needed for speech. These children tend to be mumbly or robotic, as opposed to the child with apraxia of speech, who might have jerkiness or silence. Motor speech challenges are related to the brain, such as when the brain struggles to automate the movements, to organize the sequences of movements. Stuttering can look like it belongs in this category, but I opted to put it into part 5, which is titled How the Brain Processes. At least that's the title as of right now. These are the kids that know what they want to say, but they cannot get it out. Part 3 is going to be when speech sounds don't develop as expected. And this is going to be your common speech sound disorders. That is the umbrella term used for articulation errors, phonological process errors, and the motor speech issues we just talked about, a speech sound disorder. And we will dive into the 2 other types of sound disorders, which is a phonological delay, which is patterns of errors, an articulation challenge, which is individual sound errors and maybe multiple of them. And this is when clarity is your issue, not the vocabulary, but how kids say the sounds. So that's part 3. In part 4, we're going to talk about when language itself is the struggle. And that would be language delays, when communication is developing slower than expected, but it is on the typical path of development. These are the kids who can catch up easily when parents get into programs like the Language of Play coaching program, because these kids catch up with the support before they get far behind, before they are disabled. This is true of speech sound delays as well. There's a difference between a delay and a disorder. I just talked about the disorders, but when you are just in a delay, those are the areas that I love to get parents to come on board with me, and we're just going to teach you how to help your kiddo. And then these kids catch up. We want to catch this gap early so we can catch them up before it becomes a disorder or a disability. Then in this category is also where we have language disorder, and that is a condition where the development is unusual. It is disordered, not just delayed, but it is disordered along with persistent struggles in grammar and vocabulary, understanding and expressing ideas. It affects communication across all the settings, and over time, it takes a lot of therapy. There are expressive and receptive challenges. That would be expressive being that way we express or speak and write, or we receive by listening and reading. When there is a disorder, the understanding of the structure of language, the function of language, and the use of our words is hard and needs to be taught. This whole idea is ambiguous for most people, and you can still learn to support your kiddo in language by learning what to pay attention to and how to respond to it. All right, episode 5 is when talking is hard because of how the brain processes. This would be your categories that many of us are familiar with, and that would be autism or ADHD. And with that, there's also social communication differences. We in the speech language world call that pragmatic. But this social communication difference we often see both with autism and ADHD, but it can stand alone. And that would be, for example, differences in turn taking and ability to understand social cues. Another part that can stand alone and on its own, or is found in autism and ADHD, is that the brain does not process sounds, touch, and movement the same way, which can lead to overwhelm because the sounds, touch, and movement can also impact language and speech. We will dive more into this in part 5. During part 5, we're also going to talk about stuttering because fluency is deeply tied to how the brain manages timing, time pressure, and emotion. It's not a perfectly clean fit, but it's where I decided to discuss it. Part 6 is going to be when the body impacts communication. What do I mean about that? Well, when the body is impacting communication, it could be something like cerebral palsy, which can result in a dysarthria that I mentioned earlier. Some of our kiddos come to us with low muscle tone, and these clues are present very early, and it affects the whole body. Speech takes a lot of work. Breathing, getting the volume, it can be a harder struggle to coordinate those smaller muscles, such as the tongue. So low muscle tone is also an issue. Cleft palate or other structural difference, an airway difference. We have episodes to link to, like 242, when we talk about airway differences and how mouth breathing can impact a child's development. Also in part 6, we'll talk about voice disorders. This is super common in children. Think about your child yelling and screaming that causes hoarseness that becomes persistent, or maybe allergies and reflux that affect voice quality. After that, we'll jump into part 7, when learning differences affect communication. So learning differences might be Down syndrome or other genetic syndromes that can affect intellect, maybe an intellectual disability in and of itself, or a global developmental delay. There are all kinds of ways that learning is different from one child to the next. And I know that I am naming some of the hardest learning differences. Please know that I'm trying to categorize these according to when communication is hard, because there are strategies that I'm grouping to go with each of these episodes, so that if your child has a struggle in this particular way, you will have strategies designed for those groups. In part 8, we're going to talk about when communication changes or regresses. This is when your child has had language, they've had speech, and it goes away. Examples of when this might happen would be a brain injury, seizures, a pediatric stroke, sometimes medical influences like medications, or regression due to infection or autoimmune responses. We're going to talk about that in part 8. And then we're going to wrap it up with part 9, talking about when communication is hard due to anxiety, access, and environment. In the area of anxiety, we're going to talk about selective mutism. We will also revisit stuttering. In access, we're going to talk about the barriers, such as hearing loss, or when somebody has an augmentative or assistive communication device, AAC, and it's missing, or their communication partners don't know how to use it well. And then we'll talk about environment. And environment is influenced by, let's say your child was premature and they have a history of being in the NICU in the hospital. Or we have other anxiety-based challenges due to environment. So sometimes a child might go silent for a time when their parents divorce. Or maybe there's an adoption and the child hasn't been exposed to a language-rich environment. I am super excited about this series. I've poured a lot of time into organizing it in a way that I think is going to be meaningful and give you strategies that you can say, oh, this might work for me. And hey, I think my child would be interested in that one. Please know that these episodes are going to be interspersed with some episodes from experts and from parents in between time. So for example, when I'm talking about an AAC device, the following episode is going to be a mom whose daughter uses an AAC device, and we get to listen to both of them. I'm so excited to share their story with you. I've got the episode recorded already. It just has to fall in line, so I am super pumped on this. This series will also be interrupted with Podcast-thon. You might remember it last year when we highlighted a charity one week of the year. There you have it. That's what we're coming up on. And by the end of this series, you will understand why communication is hard for some kids. You will stop blaming yourself and you'll stop blaming your child. And it is my hope that you will know what matters most to work on in each given situation, so that you feel steadier and more confident and your child makes progress. This series is also strong for those who work with children in daycares, in childcare centers, in early childhood programs, kindergartens, special education centers, anywhere that young kids gather. And as I prepare for these 9 episodes, I refreshed a lot of what I knew. So I know for sure that even a seasoned speech pathologist will benefit from the refresher and the reminder. And all this is to say, pass it along. Pass along the info. Share it. All our kids will benefit from expanding knowledge for those who live or work with children. I'm really glad you're here. You don't have to understand or remember everything today, because we're going to walk through all of this together, one piece at a time. Now be sure to go check those show notes for opportunities you will love or freebies you can benefit from. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.